Hi.
How's it going, y'all?
I'm so excited to talk to you.
Oh, look at this.
I know, and look, it matches my pin.
Nice pin.
I went back to Miss Saigon last night for the second time.
Yeah?
This is a beautiful production.
It's a lot of fun.
It's grand. It's so big and sweeping, and of course, a classic.
Yeah, it's one of those, it was one of the last really mega musicals of like the 80s, 90s.
What was your first experience with Miss Saigon?
My very first experience with Miss Saigon was my brother sang Why God in a voice recital when I was like 12 and he was 15, and he killed it.
Cool,
Yeah.
and now you're doing it on Broadway.
Now I'm here, yeah.
Okay, so let's tell everyone about your character, John. I feel like he's kind of two different guys. In Act 1, he's a certain type of person, and in Act 2, he's another. Let's start with John from Act 1. Who is he?
Well, I think the overall theme of John is that he's about action. That's kind of the way I approach it. And so when you're thrust into a war and you know, your primal instincts come out and you gotta do what you gotta do to get by or to I don't think John is necessarily a villain. I think he is just troubled and needs to act out. So what he ends up doing is buying prostitutes and doing drugs and trying to forget, you know. And
the first scene, the first time we see you, you've got a gun out. And then you've got it, like, it's pretty violent.
Yeah, we call that the interrogation. So in the overture of the whole show, is it better if I direct this at you or just at everybody?
Just to everybody.
So in the overture, there's a lot of, it kind of sets the tone for the whole show and the action and what it's like in Vietnam. And so there's this interrogation part where these bombs are going off and they're getting closer and closer to Saigon. Because in the war, before the Americans pulled out, it was because the front line was starting, we were retreating. And so we're trying to figure out who's doing the bomb and, you know, and all of that. And so we interrogate this one guy, maybe not the best way.
And then the first time you speak is in the Dreamland.
Yes, Dreamland brothel, strip club.
And you are kind of the catalyst for the main storyline, both in the first act and the second act. The two main characters are Kim and Kris. Kim is a young prostitute, and Kris is a soldier. And John decides he's going to purchase Kim for the night for...
Kim, yes. Apparently, Kim just got to Saigon. She just fled from the rice fields. And this is her first night as a prostitute. And the engineer who runs Dreamland picks her up off the street and brings her in. Now, Kris, in which I buy Kim for, he is my friend, and he's not acting like himself. So I'm like, here, I try to get him to do some drugs. I try to get him to relax.
You're an instigator.
And I'm an instigator to get him, you know, out of his mind, out of his thoughts. And yeah, so then I end up buying Kim for him. He's not about it. And then I end up pressuring the two to go off together that night.
And then they fall in love.
And then they fall in love.
And that would be just such a happy ending, wouldn't it?
In the first 5 minutes, they're deeply in love.
Yeah, and then the second act takes place after the war.
Yeah.
And how much time is supposed to have passed?
So 3 years have passed.
That's right.
So when we exit Saigon at 1975, and then we end up going back to Bangkok, where a lot of the refugees went from Vietnam to go find this baby that Kris and Kim had.
And your character seems to have really matured in that time. Yes. Is that because so many of the soldiers coming back, as far as you understand, just needed to make a clean break and basically reinvent themselves when they came home? I understand that you can't talk from actual experience of having been there, but in terms of your research into the characters and the backstory.
Yeah, I think PTSD has a lot to do with it, and John being about action, he's not one to sit at home and dwell in his feelings, so he's like, he realizes the result of his mistakes. And so he decides to do something about it. Mm-hmm. And the best thing that he can do is go back over there and try to save these kids who are American citizens and who have rights and you know.
Can you talk about that song that you sang at the beginning of Act 2?
All right, so basically the kind of derogatory term that they gave these kids, these mixed kids, is bouille. So
which literally translates to like
the dust of life. Yeah. At least that's what the song says. And so in the beginning of Act 2, it's about John trying to get money for this the Bouille Foundation to go back over there and save these kids. And
most of which were the children of prostitutes and soldiers.
And GIs that were over there. And through his work of doing that, he ends up finding out that his best friend Kris has a baby that's over there. And so he ends up having to tell Kris, and then they all go over to Bangkok to see, A, if it's real, and B, if it is real, what are we going to do about this, and how are we going to handle this situation?
And none of this would have happened if it hadn't been for John.
Exactly. So I'm like the most important character.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Basically.
Okay, so let's talk about the sort of backstage stuff at Miss Saigon. First of all, you're playing a Marine. What kind of workouts do you do to get Marine buff?
I order a lot of Domino's.
I don't accept that. That is not fair.
No, I really do. I'm obsessed with pizza.
So you're just lifting heavy pizza boxes?
Yeah, just pizza, like from the box to my mouth is like how I work out. But no, I just moved into a nice apartment building recently, and there's a gym in there, and so I just, in order to warm up to be able to scream and sing in the show, I'm running or I'm lifting weights and try to get my circulation up before the show. But it was also a conscious thing throughout rehearsal. You know, you want to tell the story as best as you can. Mm-hmm. And I think for me, John being about action is like, you know, in order to get his mind off stuff, I picture him in the gym, or you picture him out fighting people or, you know, doing what he can to forget.
Off stage, you are kind of a teddy bear, I understand. I went through your Instagram last night, and there is this adorable picture of you reading stories to the two little boys who play the kid
Tam,
who's supposed to be 2 or 3 in the show. How old are those actors?
Those actors are about 4 or 5.
They are adorable.
They are the cutest, most badass kids that, you know, and they're sick. Some of them are sick right now, so they'll be coughing or sneezing on stage, and you just have to deal with it because that's what, you know, kids will be doing. And at first we've gone through a couple of TAMs, is what we call them.
And the show's only been running for a couple of months.
Exactly.
They must age out pretty quickly.
It's not aging out. I think they started really young, and so we had these 2 beautiful little girls that were 3 years old, but at 3 years old, the brain is a completely different thing, and they just wanted to run around and play as kids do. And so I think they found that like 4 and 5 is like the right age of development.
And you just like to because you have this hour in the middle of the show.
Yeah, so I go hang out with these crazy kids, and it actually helps the show because then, or it helps my show because when you see these kids and then you think about them in some sort of camp over in Vietnam, oh my God, it's like.
Yeah, and you know, John is a child advocate,
exactly.
So it makes sense that you can kind of stay in character.
Exactly.
Before you did Miss Saigon, you were in another very popular show on Broadway.
Yes.
Hamilton.
And Hamilton the musical.
This was President George Washington. It's okay to cheer. And as I was looking back and reading about you, the thing that caught my eye is that you're actually from a town called Hamilton.
Yeah.
In Bermuda.
Yeah, I was born in Bermuda, and the capital of Bermuda is Hamilton, and that's where I was born and raised until I was 7. My father still lives there.
Oh, not only does he live there.
Yeah.
He's the town crier, and he wears this outfit that looks just like George Washington's costume on Broadway.
Yeah, he wears the tights and the knickers and 3-corner hat and in like 90 degrees and is walking around Hamilton. And you know, when the Queen goes to Bermuda, he's there to bring her around. And you know, when my mom goes to Bermuda, who's the real queen, she brings her around. And they call him the unofficial mayor of Hamilton.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
and
I think he's kind of where I got the bug from. So
the performing bug.
Exactly. So he would perform in pantomimes and musicals, and he's a singer in Bermuda. And yeah, so there's 3 of us. There's my sister, my brother, and me, and we all got the bug from him.
And you started performing right out of school, right? I mean, you're pretty young, but you have this incredible resume, including some of the most lauded off-Broadway shows. You've done Shakespeare in the Park. The one that I want to talk about is Lazarus, which was David Bowie's musical.
Right down the street here.
Yeah, and you actually worked with him right before he passed away, right?
Yeah, we were in rehearsals with David Bowie, and you know, he would be there as much as he could. And then there were days where he just didn't show up, and we were like, well, he's David Bowie, he's famous as hell, so he got things to do. And we didn't know that he was sick the whole time. So one day we wake up to go record our cast album, and I had like 25 text messages, and I never get 25 text messages. And I was like, okay, what's going on? And we read that he died. I read that he died on my way to the recording studio when we were supposed to be recording with him. So, I mean, that album definitely has a special place in my heart, and I think we were able to capture the emotion and kind of turmoil of that time. Because the show was really abstract, and we thought it was just kind of this like weird space nightmare that we were like, okay, we're just gonna do this. And it really came into focus once he passed away. And it was about him feeling isolated because of his fame, also because of his sickness, and this show was him trying to deal with that.
You could have rescheduled that recording session, but you didn't, right? Like, you guys recorded that album within hours of that announcement.
Of his passing, yeah.
And you have one song in which you're featured. Can you talk about that a little bit?
I sang All the Young Dudes on the album, and it's really interesting because where that falls in the show is there's this couple who's madly in love, and we're out and we're drinking and we're having a great time, and we sing this great anthem that David Bowie wrote, and then soon after I got killed, and very graphic actually. It was really cool. And yeah, that we all just kind of sat together and we agreed that we were going to do this today, and it was probably the best day to do it. There's no other day we can record this album. We just have to do it.
Do you remember a specific interaction you had with David before he passed away that you'll carry with you?
Yeah, he was such a quiet guy. I think his biggest note for me was, you know, just sing more drunk. I was like, what? He's like, yeah, don't worry about the notes, just sing it and just be drunk. And I was like, oh, okay, I could do that.
Have you brought that to your character in Miss Saigon? I mean, he's playing a guy who's had tossed a few back.
Yeah, tossed a few back. He's a little coked up. He's, yeah. It's a little different than in Miss Saigon because it's more seen, you know, rather than just song, but seen through music. But definitely, he taught me a lot. It was amazing to work with David Bowie because all I really knew about him was Labyrinth, the movie, really, or Under Pressure, his song. And so working with him, I was able to fall in love with his music and what he did for fashion and for pop culture. And then he was gone.
Yeah, wow. Going back to Miss Saigon,
yes,
you have a moment with a solo saxophone, as we might say. You play the saxophone in this show. You are really playing, right?
What do you think?
I think you're really playing.
Okay.
And is that the idea for me to think that you're really playing?
Yeah, no, I ain't playing no damn saxophone. I wanted to, and I could learn. I told them, I was like, I can learn, I can do it. But then there's different unions and stuff, and with, you know, if I was out sick, then another study goes on, it just made it much more complicated.
Got it.
So,
well, you mime it very well.
Thank you very much.
And then there is this song later in the show called Solo Saxophone, and I thought you were going to come out and be like in a, you know, silhouette of like the solo saxophonist.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's great because it's like John is just full of surprises. You don't think this kind of like, you know, rough, you know, army man is all of a sudden going to whip out a saxophone and just like start playing it. And then also, you don't think that he's going to have such a soft spot for kids. So I think...
Well, it humanizes him a little bit. Yeah. I mean, you can see that he's not just this monster. He's a guy with an artistic side, a soft side.
Yeah.
And then that comes back around as
he's... too.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Talk about the cast a little bit. Have you made friends with them? Are you hanging out after the show?
Oh, definitely. We all have a good time. There's this... one of our cast members, her name is Erica Hunter. She put together this thing called Broadway Industry Night at the Dream Hotel. And so every Thursday night after the show, there'll be a bunch of different Broadway shows. We all get together for a drink and just to hang out and have a good time. And yeah, our cast we like to turn up. We like to have a good time. And Alistair and I, he plays Kris. We're really close, and he's turned me on to this guy named Darren Brown, who's this like illusionist back in England, and I had no clue who he was. And we just sit and watch hours of YouTube videos together of this guy like tricking people and doing magic tricks.
Cool.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
I'm gonna have to look him up.
Yeah, and then also, it's really great because the show only shows like this much of everybody's talent. Like even Noble Lazada, she is like she's a crazy amazing singer in the show. She plays Kim. But then also she has like Mariah Carey whistle tones and like can riff scales like nobody else. So it's amazing to only know these people in a vacuum, and then they just start surprising you all the time.
Yeah, that actually reminds me of I had some surprises with you because as I like to do, I went down a YouTube hole just watching videos of you from everywhere I could find them. And there are these incredible cabaret events that happen from time to time called Broadway Sings, fill in the blank. And there was like Broadway Sings Whitney Houston, and there's Broadway Sings Michael Jackson, and then there's some new musicals that you've been a part of readings, concerts for. And man, the Michael Jackson Bad cover, you've got to record that.
Yeah, I was really proud of that. I just thought, well, Josh, who actually orchestrates it, he's great because I just kind of go in with a crazy idea. And I was like, what if Bad was like Frank Sinatra, Rat Pack Bad?
Yeah, but
gangster.
Bad was a standard.
Yeah, and so that's how it came out. And then with Broadway Sings Whitney Houston, I kind of wanted, Saving All My Love for You. The lyrics are kind of interesting. It's like, I know you got your family and you got your wife in the song, but I'm over here and I'm saving all my love for you. So I kind of wanted it to be dark and bluesy and sexy.
Maybe Eva should sing that, like Kim could sing that song.
Yeah, she definitely could.
And so when they do Broadway Sings Mariah Carey, we've got to get her.
Oh, she got to be on it, yeah.
We got to get her out there.
Yeah, she's crazy good.
Who else has secret talents that we wouldn't know about?
Secret talents?
Or what's yours? Like, if we looked at your resume, what's under the special skills section?
I make bracelets. I made this bracelet. Yeah.
Where'd you learn to do that?
Well, I'm a huge Tom Hardy fan, and he had this crazy weird looking bracelet in like all his movies. I think he wears it, but I noticed it in Mad Max, and it turns out this is called a paracord survival bracelet. So you could throw me in the woods, and I'll be able to survive because of this bracelet. It's been not really.
How so?
It's like 10 feet of cord that is just kind of wrapped around your wrist, and so if you need to like propel down the wall or make a fire, it's kind of flammable, or make a shelter.
You're making that stuff
up. No. So I did this show. I did this show called Whirl Inside a Loop, and
which I'm killing myself that I didn't get to see.
Yeah, it was a really special show, and basically, Dick Scanlon and Sherry Renee Scott, they went to a prison. And they started a personal narrative program there as part of rehabilitation through the arts for these prisoners. And basically they said, write about something that changed your life. And a lot of the prisoners wrote about their childhood. A lot of prisoners wrote about their crimes. And these monologues were so good, with a lot of shaping and crafting by Sherry and Dick. They were like, we need to tell these guys stories and talk about rehabilitation through the arts. So that's what they did, and through that, it was so much about survival and the whirling and looping of life that our world looped these survival bracelets for all the guys in the cast.
Cool. And do you wear that on stage? Because I could see that as being something that John would be into as well.
Yeah, it is a military, actually. It's a military thing. So I do wear this on stage. I don't know if I'm supposed to, but I do.
Well, it's in the show now.
It's in the show now.
Yeah.
It's frozen.
Oh, cool. That reminds me, one of your castmates in that show is Derek Baskin.
Yeah.
And I know Derek at one point earlier in your career gave you some advice. Do you remember what it was?
Yeah, Derek Baskin is like one of the most amazing singers and performers I've ever, heard or seen in my life. And when I was 14 years old, I did AIDA at North Shore Music Theater, which is this regional theater in Massachusetts. And I think that was a moment that really changed my life because I saw older black men, like, from Broadway over here, like, killing it. And it really made a dream a reality for me that it was possible. And Derek, he just, like, really took a liking to me and sat me down, and he was like, listen, this is possible, you can do it, so do it.
And then a few years later, there you were co-starring in New York City with him.
With him, yeah.
Yeah, you've really made the dream come true. You went to Juilliard. Which class were you in, and who were your classmates?
I was in group 42, so...
That's how they do it at Juilliard.
Yeah,
like, there was like group
groups,
1,
yeah.
and every year there's a new group number.
I know. Well...
Like, were you in the same group as Philippa Sue?
No, Philippa Sue was
Sharp?
one ahead of me, and Alex Sharp was one below me.
Okay.
So, and then Corey Hawkins, who's the lead in the new 24 series, he was like 2 grades above me, and then we ended up doing another show together called Hurt Village, which was a play off Broadway by Katori Hall. And
another playwright who just is off the charts, incredible. Like, you really have, done Shakespeare in the Park. What is there left to do? You know, you've done like the big revival, you've done Hamilton, you did Shakespeare in the Park, and these off-Broadway stuff. You've worked with David Bowie.
Shit, yeah.
What's next?
What's next?
I mean, let's assume you stay with Miss Saigon for a good couple of years. It's a huge
couple of years,
hit.
girl. Come on, not a couple of years.
You stay there for as long as you want.
8 shows a week for a couple of years.
However long you want. I'm just saying, I'm not trying to cut Miss Saigon short.
No.
That's what we're here to talk about.
I would love to come back to Miss Saigon in like 5 years and have it still be playing. But I think next, I want to be sitting up here talking about an action movie.
Ooh.
Yeah, I want to be sitting up here like, I watch this series. I'm a geek about actor interviews and stuff, so I always watch this series.
Who's your favorite?
Yeah, definitely. I think Samuel L. Jackson. He just comes up in here, and he sits and he just like doesn't give a shit, and he's just like, yeah.
Maybe you can co-star with him in something one of these days.
Sam?
Let's put it on the bucket list, like Derek Baskin says.
I know, right?
I think this is actually a Walt Disney quote, but he's, if you can dream it, you can do it.
When you wish. Nah.
Keep going.
No.
Come on.
No. I was lying. But no, that's for real. I mean, in the Heights, I idolized Lin-Manuel Miranda and Kris Jackson, who, and in high school. And then all of a sudden it was like 19, I was in a room auditioning with them, and then I turned 20 and I had the job.
And you were playing Benny.
And I was playing Benny, and I got to perform with Lin-Manuel Miranda in Puerto Rico, his homeland.
Yeah.
Like 2 weeks into the job, and it was like, I could like cry thinking about that. That was an amazing experience.
So that was another role that was originated by Kris Jackson, as was George Washington in Hamilton.
Exactly.
Do you feel like you're like a Kris Jackson type now?
I'm light skinned and have thick eyebrows, so yeah.
And you're tall.
I think I was Kris Jackson type.
Not a bad.
And he's good. He's like an older brother, and
footsteps to follow.
We have
There's another Instagram post you have of you guys both in your George Washington jackets, and
that was also another thing. Performing at the Tonys was crazy.
Oh yeah,
so that was a good experience.
I have a feeling we're going to see you there again.
That'd be cool. That'd be cool to perform.
Coming up. Yeah. They just announced today that Kevin Spacey is hosting the Tonys.
I know.
So tell him I said hi.
I will.
Sweet. We have time to take some questions from the audience.
Yeah, let's do it.
Hi. So you talked about the fact that 5 minutes into the story, the characters are already madly in love. And I was wondering if that was a struggle for you guys as a creative team. How do you make that not feel dated? We met one night, now you're the love of my life, and I will wait for you for years and years and years. And also the fact that we don't know much about her besides the fact that she's in love with this man and her relationship to her child. So how do you think that fits into today, and how do you struggle to make not that feel dated?
So, like, how does the story relate today through, like, the kind of old-timey musical thing?
Right, that sort of old love story. And
I think the way that our director makes it work, at least in my mind, because I still haven't seen it,
You mean because you've been in it, though?
Yeah.
Yes, you haven't seen it from the outside.
Exactly, from the outside. But the way that it makes sense in my mind is that the darker we make it at the beginning, the more desperate you see these characters. And I think if through the darkness, that little bit of light, all of a sudden you do meet people and have a connection that is possible. Now, whether or not it is actual love or not, I think that's kind of up to the audience to determine. But for me, the story isn't necessarily a love story between Kim and Kris. I think Kris is the hope in Kim's mind, and I think it's the love story between a mother and a child and what she's willing to sacrifice in order for the child to have a better life. So I think that's why it's relatable today for me, at least. Yeah.
Another question?
Is there any pressure putting on a revival this big compared to like new musicals that you have done or whatnot?
Yeah, definitely. To try to put a label on something and say that it's reimagined is really hard. I was able to be a part of a revival of Rent, and that was really tough because it was also another iconic show. And in this show, it's tough to break the minds of the audience coming in with preconceived notions of what this show should be. But I never saw the show before, and in fact, I hardly heard any of the music.
Except for your brother singing that song when you were 12.
Oh my God, and I don't even sing that song in the show. So it's I learned it for the audition and then learned it in rehearsal, and so I think that ended up freeing me up of any sort of kind of pressure.
I think this is a good time to also address the spectacle that is the helicopter, which has been reimagined, and it is intense.
It is.
So if you want to see a helicopter, you're going to get it.
I know. It is. It's really wonderful.
We've got one question left.
Hey, so I saw that you were in Motown musical too. So along with Miss Saigon and Hamilton, like playing in different periods of time, does it feel any different performing in those times, and how much does maybe wardrobe and the sets help you get into those time periods?
Oh, definitely. I mean, if you're wearing, I don't have much hair, as you can see, but this is for the longest I've had my hair in 10 years, and the sideburns help
yeah, those are very of the era in Miss Saigon.
And so when I look in the mirror, it's almost shocking. But it does help me get into the show. And then when I was playing Smokey Robinson in Motown, the kind of conked, slick back hair and the shoes and the jackets definitely make you walk a certain way. And then in Hamilton, those were real wool suits, and you can only walk a certain way when you have a sword on your hip. And so definitely the physicality is determined by what you're wearing. Sorry, that was really inarticulate, but yeah.
What was your favorite song to perform as Smokey Robinson?
You Really Got a Hold on Me.
Since this is the very end of the interview, will you just give us a couple of lines to go out on?
You crazy.
Please.
No. Okay. I gotta pick a low key. I ain't ready for this.
Yeah, key it down.
I'm nervous. Goddamn. I don't like you, but I love you. Seems like I'm always thinking of you, though you do me wrong now. My love is strong now. You really got a hold on me.
You just made my day. You come back anytime. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Please go see Miss Saigon.